after watching The Founder and seeing how Ray Kroc treated the McDonald's brothers, I was like, let's see if I ever go back to McDonald's again and support that nonsense. I can't help it. Their hazelnut iced coffees are just so delicious. And so are their fries. Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and this is my theological review with spoilers for The Founder, starring Michael Keaton, Nick Offerman, and John Carroll Lynch. And I gotta say, for a movie that isn't really up my alley, for a movie that isn't really my genre, I did enjoy it, and I'm gonna give it a solid B. So first, gotta say a huge thank you to Falcon B. Me reviewing this movie is a request from him, so thank you so much, Falcon B, not only for requesting that I review this movie, but also being patient with me as it took some time for me to get to it, but here we are reviewing this movie. And for me, a solid B means this. What was that? Did you hear that? I don't know if you heard that. That was like a truck. Now, for me, a solid B means I found this movie compelling from the beginning to the end. From the way the story was told to the actors and the performances, all of it was well done. That said, it's not a movie that I would ever own or buy, and I'm not in a hurry to see it again. So I did enjoy it, and if you haven't seen it and you're looking for something new, it's definitely something I'd recommend that you check out, because overall, it is an interesting story, and it's important to remember, based on a true story. So always nice to fact check it afterwards, but as I go through this analysis and I go through this review, I'm going to be doing this analysis on the film, how the film told the story, and how the film portrayed these characters.
You start with something pure, something exciting. Then come the mistakes, the compromises.
And it is a tragic story because everything started just so pure and so good, and then come the mistakes, and then come those compromises. And one of the things that just made it all the more tragic and compelling to watch is you have the performance of Nick Offerman and John Carroll Lynch here in the beginning. Now, those two actors as the McDonald brothers were absolutely fantastic because they did a great job drawing you into the characters and drawing you into the excitement they had for their hamburger stand, McDonald's, and kind of the joy that they had in the fact that they did revolutionize the fast food industry. Instead of taking 30 minutes to get your food, it takes 30 seconds. But what was cool was just their excitement. So when Ray Kroc comes, at the beginning, you still kind of have hope for Ray. You know, you're kind of thinking, yeah, the dude is a salesman, he's kind of sleazy and slimy, but there's hope for him. But when he's getting the tour of the kitchen and you just see the openness of the McDonald brothers, what you want is for everything to go well for them, because their performance again was so good in those moments when they were just openly showing the kitchen. You just love their trust. You love that kind of openness and transparency. And then when Ray Kroc takes them to dinner and they talk about the story of how McDonald's really started, kind of the trials and tribulations they went through to get everything to where it was. And it was very cool to learn the history of the McDonald brothers because I didn't know anything about that. And it was funny as they were just talking about learning how to do this fast food system and showing them practice, how they got a bunch of people together and they would use chalk and they would draw out their kitchen design and they would practice through several different designs to see which has the optimal flow, and then they had it built that way. But then there was the learning curve of the people, and so it was very interesting to go through that. And again, part of what made that story so interesting was these two actors playing the McDonald brothers giving such a stellar performance. Their enthusiasm was so great that I was leaned forward listening to this story and enjoying it. But what it really shows is the pure vision, and it shows that the McDonald brothers, they had it. They had the vision for the guts of the restaurant. They had the vision for how this should look, how this should flow. They had it. And they even tried to franchise it, and it just didn't really work for them, according to this movie. And so now they've decided they're going to focus on this one particular store. And so it was very cool to see their pure vision and the fact that they knew the identity of the McDonald's restaurant. They knew what it was, they had their standards, they had their core values, and they were sticking to that period. And that was the problem with franchising, because the person to overlook that wasn't sticking to their standards, and that's what they needed. They knew the identity of what this restaurant was. And so at first you like Ray Kroc because he gets it. He understood the vision they were casting. And not only did he understand the vision, and not only did he understand the identity, but he was on fire to do a franchise that stuck to that identity. So at first you really like Ray Kroc because you see that he really does have a pure vision for how to franchise this, for how to do what the brothers had a hard time doing and making this a national thing. And so that first struggle where he got his first McDonald's franchise built, like, I was kind of with him on that struggle. And when he's like on the ground, he's like, please let this one work, as they're about to break that ground on his McDonald's franchise. I was like, yeah, man, I hope this works for you. I mean, you're still a little sleazy and slimy, but I'm thinking he's going to grow. And so I'm like excited for Ray Kroc. I'm excited that he's got the vision. And the thing that was really interesting about it is when he saw Dick's design for the golden arches, he recognized it. Kind of how you have a cross over a church, an American flag over a government building. He saw those golden arches as the symbol that when people see them, they will know exactly what those arches are. He had the vision right from the get-go. And to me, that's where everything was pure, and that's where it was all good. Because the McDonald's brothers had their God-given talent, their ability to see what the restaurant should be and to know its identity. Ray Kroc had his God-given talent that he was able to catch on to that vision and was able to expand that vision and keep that vision alive while franchising it out. Like, he really did see that potential. And to me, those are those God-given gifts. But this is how the devil works. He can't create his own things. All he could do is take what is already created and what is already good and twist it and pervert it. On paper, this should have worked. Ray Kroc with the vision to franchise this thing. The McDonald brothers with the vision of how this thing should work and the standards and the identity of the restaurant. But it didn't work because of greed.
Business is war. It's dog eat dog, rat eat rat. If my competitor were drowning, I'd walk over and I'd put a hose right in his mouth.
That jerk. But you see, this is the importance of the gut check. There's this quick clip right here.
There's a wolf in the hen house. We let him in. I never should have listened.
We have a contract for just this sort of thing, Dick.
Should have trusted my gut.
And I find that clip incredibly tragic because, you know, hindsight is 20/20. Dick had that gut check. He knew something wasn't quite right about Ray. Rather than exploring that check, they went forward. But one of the big, most tragic things for me is Ray himself.
Can you say the same?
I can't. Nor would I want to.
Hence your single location.
But one of the scenes that to me just really revealed his true motives and what was truly running his life this entire time was when he was in the restroom with Dick and they were having this conversation after he had made the McDonald's brothers sign a contract handing over the McDonald's Corporation solely to Ray Kroc. And they wanted only 1% in perpetuity. That's all they wanted. And he couldn't even give them that. He goes, well, I can't sell that. We can't put that in the contract. But let me shake your hand and I'll make sure you get that money. But after he's taken their name, after he has taken their franchise, after he has taken all of that, he has this conversation with Dick.
It's not just the system, Dick. It's the name. That glorious name, McDonald's. Sounds like America. A guy named McDonald, he's never gonna get pushed around in life.
Could you imagine if instead of working against the McDonald's brothers, he was working with them? And in working with them, if he had told them at the beginning what he saw that was so special about them. But could you imagine maybe what could have been in that moment if he had lifted them up and they had worked together? No. Instead, he was driven by his lust and greed that when he saw that name and he saw that something special, he had to have it for himself. He had to make it his own. He had to take it from them and make it his. And to me, that was just incredibly tragic to watch because you could just see he's a slave to his own greed. He's a slave to his own lust. You know, in the beginning, ironically, he's listening to this motivational speaker about persistence. And his persistence, I think, was a God-given talent. I think the way that he saw things, it was a God-given vision. But he used it the wrong way and allowed greed to be this snake in the garden to come on in, and he allowed that to rule him, taking what was given to him as a good thing and now twisted and perverted and used for something evil. Because here he is listening to this motivational speaker.
A man is what he thinks about all day long.
Be careful what you think, because your thoughts run your life. And so constantly thinking about greed, constantly thinking the grass is greener on the other side, constantly being ruled by that means he was a constant slave. So here he even has a marriage to a good woman. And he expressed to her, I don't feel like you support me. Well, there was a scene where she showed him support. But here he is wanting to be a team with his wife and wanting her to think big and have the same ambition as her. And yet he's not a team player. He doesn't tell her that he mortgaged the house for the franchise. Here he is keeping those things from her. And then here he is seeing another man's life and working out how he's going to pursue her. I mean, seriously, if you look at that scene, he's totally distracted in the conversation before he even knows that woman is somebody who thinks big. Before he even knows that woman is married to this guy who's wanting to be a McDonald's franchisee. Like, before he really knows that stuff, he is caught looking at her the other side of the room, and he's lusting. That's what he's thinking about. How could I get her? The grass is greener over there. And that's just the pattern of his life. And what you see laid out in this movie is he is driven by his lust and his greed and his vindictiveness, and he's an absolute slave to it. That first franchise that he built, that McDonald's, he called that number one. He called himself the founder because he founded the franchise. And he was so vindictive about it that even the McDonald's brothers, once they signed everything over, couldn't even let their first restaurant be called McDonald's. That name had to be taken down. And then Ray built his McDonald's a few blocks away and put them out of business. Pure vindictiveness. Don't love money. Be satisfied with what you have, for God has said, I will never fail you. I will never abandon you. I think that's a powerful thing because it's good to have ambition. It's awesome to see vision and pursue that vision and pursue those things. So do that. But in the process of pursuing, let's make sure if we have a check, we take a moment and examine that check. Let's take a moment every step of the way and let's make sure we're not stepping on people. Let's make sure we're not stealing from people. Let's pursue God and his righteousness and his way of doing things. And let's be thankful every new step. Look, I'm on a new step. God, thank you for this provision. Thank you for bringing me here and allowing his joy to fill us and being thankful for where we are as we continue to pursue that vision. Those are ways to ensure that not only are we following a vision in a godly way and pursuing something in a godly way, but also to ensure that we're continuing to pursue a godly vision. And so I look at this movie, and that's the tragedy that I see. The unthankfulness that is in Ray Kroc. The total driven by greed and lust and how he's a slave to it. And even the McDonald's brothers who did want to see a franchise, who did want to see things grow. And they had the check in the gut, but they still worked with Ray. And to me, that's just the tragedy of this whole thing. So what did you think of this movie, The Founder? Would you give it a B? Would you go higher? Would you go lower? Let's talk about that in the comments. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button to become a Durbanian and hit that bell by the subscribe button so you're notified for my next movie review, ranking video, theological analysis, or anything else I do here. Once again, thank you, Falcon B, for requesting this movie. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.